Hanging with me today in the VH1 Classic studio is someone who I've known for quite a while and been a fan of his music for even longer. Blackie Lawless of W.A.S.P.
Thank you, sir, for having me.
Someone who metal fans certainly don't need any introduction to. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
What have the members of W.A.S.P. been up to lately? Well, in addition to headlining the current American Metal Blast 2005 tour, they recently recorded The Neon God, a concept album so epic it was released in two parts. Part 1, The Rise, and Part 2, The Demise. So, Blackie, obviously everyone's very excited about this upcoming tour, which we'll get into a little bit later in the hour. But first I want to ask you about The Neon God, because I spoke to you just when you were getting ready to write the first installment of it. And I know it's a project that's very near and dear to your heart, obviously very ambitious because it's in two parts. It's not the first concept record that you've done, but what was the inspiration for this one?
Well, I was looking for what I thought was the biggest idea that is the greatest common denominator between everybody, you know, and which is, who am I? Where am I going? Does my life have meaning? Does it have no meaning? Is there a God? Is there no God? I took all those questions and put them into one idea, which is, oh, tell me, my Lord, why am I here? And I think that's probably the single biggest question that we ask ourselves all the time. You know, it's the thing we think about the most but talk about the least because it frightens us, and then, which is natural, you know, but it's all about that journey that we're all on, and we're all trying to figure it out, you know, and I'm in the same boat with everybody else.
Now, you've been a fan of concept records, and as I said, you've done them before. Where does that inspiration come from? I know you're a big Who fan, right?
Sure,
so,
yeah,
so there's, and you've covered Who song.
Right.
I mean, where did the inspiration for the record come from? Did it come directly from another artist, or was it just something that came out of you more?
No, it's, you know, I feel like I have very general taste. Even though the shows that we've done in the past have been deemed eclectic, I just feel like I got real general taste. I like the same music, the same food, the same movies everybody else likes. You know, so I'm real average when it comes to that. And if I'm thinking about an idea that I'm moved by, then there's probably a pretty good chance that there's a lot of other people going to feel like that, you know. So that's what I said. I was looking for what I thought was the greatest common denominator that, you know, bonds us all together.
Now, when you write this stuff, and I mean, it's got to be a pretty massive undertaking to really see this story completely.
It's like calling King Kong a monkey, man. I mean, it's tough.
How much time did you spend on
Well, I really, off and on, about 10 years, trying to develop the concept, you know, because I had done the Crimson Idol back in 91, 92.
Sure.
And to be honest with you, it took me 10 years to get up my courage to face that beast again, because there's huge, huge pieces of your soul that you leave on a record like that whenever you do it. And it takes all your concentration, all your courage to do something like that, because you see, it's not just trying to tell a story that you think you can identify with and other people can identify with. To do that, you have to go in that dark little closet, and you've got to stay there. You've got to become that entity. You have to write, you know, as it's method acting effectively, but you're also writing at the same time. But also, when you're doing that, you know, when you dare to do a record that is not just a normal record, you're sticking your head up above the crowd. If you do a regular record and it fails, well, then you go back to the drawing board and you make another one. But if you tell the world that you're going to do something big and epic prior to doing that, and it fails, if you succeed, the world will worship you. If you fail, you go down in flames. So the pressure of all of that combined with going in that dark little space and staying there, when you come out of it, I mean, you're nuts. There's no question. You know, it's just you don't know who you are anymore.
And it's a tough thing to tour behind a concept record, especially as ambitious as something like The Neon God being in two parts, because people inevitably want to see you do all the hits, but I'm sure it's important for you to be able to do these songs. Have you ever thought about maybe doing some of the concept stuff maybe in another arena, maybe trying to do it on stage or do it as a movie?
I think, you know, first things first, you have to wait to see what the reaction of the audience is going to be. But we had seen other bands release things in two, you know, as one record before. You know, The Wall, Quadrophenia, things like that. And by the time you can tour the world, you know, that record is effectively over, but by the time you get to Asia, whatever it may be, you spend 3 months in Europe, you spend 3 months in America, you go to South America, you go to Asia, there's a huge wide world out there, and by the time you get there a year later, that record may be over already. So we thought, all right, we're going to stagger it in parts, and we're going to see what the reaction is by keeping it as an ongoing work in progress, you know, when we go from town to town to town. I mean, we just literally, last week got back from South America. doing that down there. So it's like, it's easier, we found, to do something like that, to stagger the releases. But all that being said, you never want to say never. But I doubt very seriously I will ever do anything like that again in my career. It just, like I said, I mean, there's blood all over those tracks, and that blood belongs to me, and I intend on keeping what little bit I have left now.
You mentioned all the touring that W.A.S.P and Blackie Lawless have been doing recently. The American Metal Blast 2005 tour is headed your way soon, and we're going to talk more about that after we get to some more classic metal music videos as Blackie Lawless continues to hang with me here on VH1 Classic. Back in 1983, the guy hanging with me this hour during VH1 Classics Metal Mania really set the metal world on its ear, not only with some killer music, but with some unbelievable stage theatrics that included throwing raw meat in the crowd. Of course, who could forget the saw blade and exploding codpiece, which I can't believe you didn't bring today. But maybe it's in the back room. Maybe you could break it out.
I'm going to mail it to you. You can try it on at home in your private moments.
Of course, Blackie Lawless of W.A.S.P, who is going out.
Arrested for domestic violence.
The American Metal Blast 2005 tour, a great package. W.A.S.P is headlining. Also on the bill, L.A. Guns, Stephen Pearcy, former lead singer of Rat, and also Metal Church. To find a date near you on that tour, go to waspnation.com. Blackie, obviously everybody knows the W.A.S.P shows are just, so well known. Talk about the earliest days, though, of those theatrics when you did a lot of that stuff that we were talking about at the top. What was the inspiration for it? Where did you kind of, where was your influence for to do a stage show like that?
We tell people the truth on this, and they find it hard to believe because when we were first starting, we had and still do have a very dark sense of humor. I mean, the things that we think are hysterical, some people find offensive. But in reality, out of that dark sense of humor came a want to entertain ourselves. So we asked ourselves, what do we want to do? Because we knew we had a very short attention span. So we said, all right, let's do this, this, and this. And to be honest with you, we really honestly felt that the rock community would look at it and go, oh, wow, that's really radical, man. It's really cool. But it wasn't until we heard the term shock rock for the first time. We were actually shocked when we heard that because we didn't believe that what we was doing was shocking. So like I said, we thought that the metal community or the rock community would look and go, wow, man, it's really cool, it's But it was not until the parents got a hold of it, they put that term to it, and we thought, what are they talking about? I mean, what's really shocking about what we're doing? We didn't get it. We didn't see what they were talking about. Because you got to understand, the reason that parents feel the way they do towards the kids and the kids feel the way they do, you got a 15-year-old, he walks in a room, he's got this splash all over his shirt and this t-shirt that he's wearing. He's announcing who he is and what he's thinking before he ever opens his mouth. The reason the parents think he's rebelling is because this kid at 15 years old is smarter than they're giving him credit for, because he's looked at his parents in that framework, being deceived by their government, being browbeat every day in the job that they're working in. They become sedate, they become browbeaten. And he's looking at that and he's thinking, you know what? I don't want to be like that for nothing. So I'm going to go against everything they're telling me I should be. Therefore, parents see as what we do as dangerous.
Now, it's interesting when you think 83, 22 years ago, there are a lot of new W.A.S.P fans that didn't see a lot of that old show and what all the hysteria was about back then. And I understand part of the American Metal Blast 2005 is bringing back some of the old elements of those stage shows, right?
Absolutely, because there's a whole generation out there, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds that have never seen this. And it doesn't matter whether it's W.A.S.P or Slayer or Iron Maiden, Twisted Sister, whoever it may be. They've heard all these stories, but they've never seen it. And these stories are living legendary in their heads. So we thought, all right, we'll show them what the fuss is all about. We'll bring back, something that is very reminiscent of what we did in 83 and 84. And we'll show them what's all about. Hey, to be honest with you, I'm bringing out a 90-pound sledgehammer and I'm gonna whack them over the head with it. Yeah. I'm gonna show them what it's all about.
That's awesome, because that's something that's overlooked so many times. I mean, if you're 20 years old and into W.A.S.P, you were 5 when this stuff was happening, so you missed the whole. You didn't get to see that whole thing.
I was driving down the street the other day in California, and I saw some kids coming out of high school, and they had their backpacks on, and one of them had a Slayer T-shirt, and one of them had an Iron Maiden T-shirt on, and I was looking at them, and they couldn't have been more than 16 or 17. I thought, when Number of the Beast was recorded, these kids weren't born yet, but. As with any decade, whether it's the 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever it may be, most of the music that comes out of those decades is crap. And we all know that. The only thing that's ever going to survive is the quality. And what these kids have discovered, they go back and they look at the musicianship, and they look at the songwriting, and they realize those bands that they were looking at in the 90s that were all staring at the tops of their shoelaces, that weren't doing anything visually, they realize they're going back to the beginning and they're rediscovering what this stuff is all about. They understand that the quality of any decade is what's going to survive.
Which is why you have Priest and Maiden and all these bands doing tremendous business out there playing Motley Crue. I mean, these tours and these giving the fans what they want and giving these younger fans an opportunity to see what they've heard about it is so big. There's one thing, though, I got to ask you, because you talk about your dark sense of humor, and I remember something you said to me years ago that just still cracks me up when I hear it. You talked about your stage show, and you said jokingly, you said, you know, if I wrote better songs, we wouldn't have to do this stuff.
Yeah, well, that was after the cod piece blew up, and I was sitting in a dressing room with my all burnt up, you know. That makes you say things you don't really want to say, you know, when you're looking, you know. But you know what? I'm wearing jeans right now. Nobody can see it. But I still have no hair on my legs right now. It's never grown back since that incident.
Right.
So,
but that being said, Joe, all kidding aside, that's the one thing about W.A.S.P. that somewhat always bothered me as a fan is, like, you know, you hear W.A.S.P. and you hear about the cod piece and the raw meat and all this stuff, but people forget, man, you've written some great songs, and without the songs, you can have the greatest stage show in the world. It's not going to matter.
That's often been said, but, you know, when we first got together, I asked Chris Holmes, I said, you know, what do you want to do? Do you want to just, you know, go out, wear jeans and sneakers and just kind of play there? I says, what do you want to do? And he looked at me, he says, is that what you want to do? And I said, nah. You know, it's just like, what do you want to do? And we started doing things to entertain ourselves. And that's really where it was born out of, because everybody seems to think that it was this grand master plan of the way we devised the whole thing. And I would really love to take credit for that, but it really didn't happen like that. It happened out of boredom, really. So that's really the way it was born.
You'll be anything but bored if you go to American Metal Blast 2005, which is on the road. And I've got one more moment to come as Blackie Lawless continues to hang with me here today on Metal Mania on VH1 Classic. It's certainly been a lot of fun hanging with Blackie Lawless of W.A.S.P., who is my guest here at the VH1 Classic studio during Metal Mania today. Of course, see Blackie and W.A.S.P. along with L.A. Guns, Stephen Pearcy, former lead singer of Rat, and Metal Church on the American Metal Blast 2005 tour. Just go to waspnation.com to find a date near you. Now, Blackie, we didn't talk about music videos, but I know, especially in the early days of W.A.S.P., with I Want to Be Somebody and Love Machine, music videos was a really big support system for W.A.S.P. And obviously the image of the band and the theatrics lent themselves so well to it. What were some of your favorite moments, some of your favorite personal videos that you've done throughout the career of W.A.S.P.?
Probably, you know, in the early days, probably Blind in Texas, there's a scene in the beginning of that where I'm crawling through the desert and there's a rattlesnake, and you can't really tell the way the video is cut, but that rattlesnake was about 5 feet away from me. And I'm crawling through the desert and I've got my head down, and the director says, get closer. And so I inch a little bit closer. He says, you got to get closer. I can't get you both in the shot. And I go, man, you want to get closer, you come in here and you get closer, because if you've ever heard that sound, there's one thing hearing it on TV, but when you hear it live, up close and personal, and you hear that zzz, you don't ever want to hear it again. You know, so that's my memory of that. But other than that, it was a 3-day shoot, and it's funny because the third day we only had just a few hours sleep, and there's another scene where I'm going through the saloon doors, and a sheriff grabs me and starts shaking me, and I had to have a little bit of help to get through that last day of shooting. And I had drank probably the better part of a fifth of vodka. And when the sheriff started shaking me, I was seeing 3 or 4 of them at that point there. So I don't remember much about the end of it.
Yeah, I remember you telling me in the past that you were inebriated during Blind in Texas.
Oh yeah, literally. You know, well, like I said, it was necessity. It was medicinal purposes.
Right. It was for the part.
That's
absolutely. Right. Tell everybody what upcoming W.A.S.P. projects there are to look forward to beyond the tour. Of course, have you even thought about the next record? Are there any DVDs? Anything that fans can look forward to?
We're going to shoot, speaking of Blind in Texas, we are going to go to Spain in the middle of August. We're coming back and we're going to start the second leg of the U.S. tour, the American Metal Blast. And we start in Texas. We're going to film for 4 nights.
Wow.
We'll be W.A.S.P. literally Blind in Texas there, and that will eventually surface as a DVD. But I think the next thing that's going to come out is we're going to do a box set that's coming out in May of next year. And then probably the next studio record will come after that in September or October.
And we should mention to people, too, about the tour. You're very much, with this American Metal Blast tour, very much doing, for the most part, a W.A.S.P. greatest hits set, right? It's going to be...
Well, you know, I think every artist or every band has to be careful when they go out not to concentrate too much on a new record, because in reality, let's be honest, that becomes self-indulgent, because you have people that have been fans for a long time, and any band that's at a 10 or 20 year history or 30 year history, every time they release a new record, that becomes their own worst competition, because they are now competing with stuff that people have had 20 years to romance in their minds. You know, people remember where they were in the back of their dad's pickup, you know, listening to Love Machine with their boyfriend or their girlfriend doing whatever. You know, so not only do you have the song to compete with, now you've got that moment that's crystallized in their mind. They're remembering forever. So they're looking for that. So when you play new material, it's got to compete against all that older stuff they've had years to romance in their mind. Plus, with the fact that maybe there's a good amount of people in that audience don't even have that new record yet. Right. So any artist or any band has to be careful about how self-indulgent they become playing new material on any tour, because like I said, if you don't, you're going to alienate a lot of that audience.
Final question before I let you go. Are we going to see the Rome meet again this year?
You'll have to come to see.
On that note, Blackie, thanks so much. It's always great to see you.
Let's say I got the grinder out and I'm sharpening the blade.
You get a great deal on hamburger this summer if you go to the W.A.S.P. show. Thanks so much for being here, Blackie Lawless of W.A.S.P. Great to see you as always. More classic metal music videos.